Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the August 29th, 2022 meeting of the General Obligation Bond Public Safety Subcommittee. I hereby call this meeting to order. We have interpreters today to provide Spanish translation. Would you please introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, my name is Elsie Duarte, and along with my colleague Carmen Cota, we will be servicing as interpreters in today's meeting. I will now introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience. Buenos días, mi nombre es Elsie Duarte y junto con mi colega Carmen Cota estaremos sirviéndoles como intérpretes en la reunión de hoy. Al momento de hacer un comentario público, de favor les pedimos que hable despacio, con claridad y deténgase después de cada pocas oraciones para interpretarle de la manera más completa posible. Gracias. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. There will be a public comment period during item 3 on today's agenda, which will be up to 30 minutes in length. Speakers will have up to 2 minutes to comment. However, prior to the start of the public comment period, I may specify a briefer duration based on the volume of speakers. If you are attending in person and would like to speak, you will need to sign up to speak at the kiosk located at the entrance of the council chambers before item 3 begins. That's before item 3. So please, if you intend to speak, sign up now. For virtual participants, registration to speak must be submitted 2 hours prior to the start of each meeting. Speakers will be called in the order received, beginning with virtual participants. Thank you. Item number 1 on our agenda, approval of minutes. Do we have a motion for approval?
Yes, Chairman, I motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion and a second.
Motion and second.
Any discussion? Any virtual attendees have any comments? Not hearing any. Motion to approve. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Before I get started, we had, I think everybody knows, another horrible incident last night, and public safety was there to protect the community they serve. And today in attendance, I saw our Public Safety and Justice Committee co-chair, or chair, Ann O'Brien, and I was going to ask her if she'd be willing to make a couple of remarks. Councilwoman O'Brien.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning to everybody, and I do want to thank all of you for your service. Many of you have served or are currently serving our community in capacity, and appreciate your additional service and volunteerism to the City of Phoenix. It really does take all of us to make the best decisions for our city and our citizens, so thank you. And yes, as you know, last night I've heard that we had a tragic incident, unfortunately, in my district, and I'm thankful to our men and women in blue, and as well our fire department who was there to take care of those who were injured. Thankfully, we have 2 officers who are going to make a recovery from their injuries. But we cannot continue down this senseless path. We need our community members to step up and to report what they are seeing and hearing and think might be a problem. We have a tip line related to crime gun incidences, so if you know of somebody who has a gun that shouldn't, or you think maybe they shouldn't, please report it to 602-644-5805, or call Crime Stop or Silent Witness. But please do not remain silent. We need the community to partner with our men and women in blue to keep us all safe. My hearts and my prayers and thoughts are with our officers as they recover, as well as the community members' families who we lost in this tragic incident. Chairman, thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you all.
Thank you, Councilwoman O'Brien, and this chair, and I'm confident I speak for the board members, our police officers, all of them on duty, off duty, their families, our firefighters the same, our community members, all literally in our thoughts and in our prayers right now. And we need to have each other's backs and take care of each other as strong community members that we are. I'll give any of the other board members an opportunity to speak if they like. No? Okay. So our next agenda item is basically we're going to go through the introductions during the meeting. We'll be going over follow-up items from our first meeting. The subcommittee has received comments from the public, and members have their own vision of priority capital needs. We'll continue to receive more input today. As the subcommittee hears presentations and public comment today, I will ask that members keep in mind that we have a limited time to reach our recommendations. We are tasked with identifying a prioritized list of projects to recommend to the executive committee no later than the last scheduled subcommittee meeting. There will not be additional meetings scheduled. As a reminder, the city has not had a general obligation bond program since 2006, and significant infrastructure needs exist that exceed the $500 million scope approved by the City Council. The subcommittee should also consider projects a higher priority that would ensure city facilities and infrastructure can continue to be accessible and safe for operation. We have 2 meetings after today to finalize a prioritized list of project recommendations to the executive committee. No later than the 3rd meeting, the subcommittee will need to have a list of projects identified, and no later than the 4th meeting, those projects will need to be ranked in priority order, including with a final report to the executive board. To assist the subcommittee with prioritizing projects, staff has developed a method for facilitating decisions on prioritization and will brief us today on that process following the next agenda item. And finally, the city has scheduled a public hearing for the executive committee on September 14th at 6 p.m. for purposes of engaging the public and to hear comments regarding the overall bond program. I would encourage you all to listen in to that meeting or to watch the video posted on the GO Bond website at your earliest convenience so you can hear the feedback received from the residents. Due to open meeting law requirements, subcommittee members should not plan to attend the meeting. Any questions, board members? All right, our next agenda item is for follow-up discussion and public comment regarding capital needs and discussion of the subcommittee's process for prioritizing those capital needs. I'll turn the meeting over to staff to respond to questions and requests from the last meeting. At the conclusion of the discussion on capital needs, we'll have staff go over a possible method for prioritizing projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For benefit of members of the subcommittee and the audience, my name is Lori Bays. I am Assistant City Manager here at the City of Phoenix, and I would like to also introduce our presenters today. Our first presenter will be Executive Assistant Fire Chief Scott Walker. Our second presenter will be Assistant Chief Michael Kurtenbach from the Police Department, and then our third presenter will be Deputy Director Chris Fazio from the Budget and Research Department. For our agenda today, as the chair indicated, we are following up on requests for additional information from the last subcommittee meeting. The first thing that we'll cover is the future capital needs for the fire department that were specifically requested by committee member DeGraw. We also will discuss the regional automatic aid system and how that system works to provide service. In addition, we will talk about the fire response area of prioritized projects, the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Plan, specifically requested by Subcommittee Member Ender regarding the 27th Avenue Plan. We'll also talk about police department calls for service and related response times, and finally, a potential project ranking methodology. So with without further ado, I will turn it over to Executive Assistant Chief Scott Walker.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager Bays. Good morning, Chairman Berline and members of the subcommittee. As stated, I'm Executive Assistant Fire Chief Scott Walker, and I'll be providing the Fire Department's portion of the presentation today. And our information today is really based on the inquiries you made at our first meeting. So we wanted to start by providing an overview of the future capital items that were raised for Station 20, Station 70, and Station 74. So much like we talked about the first meeting, so Station 20 would be a replacement of a current station that's located at 7th Avenue and Glendale Road in District 3. This, again, is a situation in a station that the capacity is unable to support the demand for service in this part of Phoenix. This is in the Central Core area, and it grows busier every day. The station was built in 1961, and again was designed for a different era. The station was built with one bathroom, and for many years of my career, we only had one bathroom in that station. So as you can imagine, that made for some interesting times when we had female firefighters in the station. Now, that station has been remodeled and added to over the years. You can see that the bay and the picture on the far right side is a very small bay. Unfortunately, that bay no longer fits modern apparatus, so it is limited in its ability for us to use that bay for a fire response or fire vehicle. Station 20 is 5,008 square feet, including apparatus bays, and simply put, it just does not meet our needs any longer. The station does house an engine and ladder company. Between the two, those two apparatus will respond to over 9,000 calls each year, so approximately 4,500 each. That's a very busy engine or ladder company in our system. So this project was brought forward, and the replacement of Fire Station 20 would look like, and the scope would be, to construct a replacement 20,000 square foot 5-bay fire station. The 20,000 square foot does include the apparatus bays. This would allow us to have a modern facility that incorporates the health and benefits and environmental innovations that we now put into fire stations, protecting our firefighters in the exposures they receive from cancer, meeting a diverse modern fire department, the needs we have. For this project, we are projecting the cost to be $18,194,942,000, and would be a total impact of GEO bond fund at the same amount. We are fortunate we already own the land that this station would be added to or be built on next to Station 20, so it'd be basically utilizing the current station location and the additional piece of property we own. That's why the cost is a little bit less than some of those others we presented before. There would be ongoing operational costs for this project would be $5,026,000. So the benefits to the community, if this were to move forward, would be, again, increased service delivery capacity to the community, improved response times, and would allow for a new medical response vehicle, a new rescue company or ambulance in our system, and a new battalion chief company into the system, significantly improving our overall service delivery and our response times. So the second station that was brought up was station number 70. This would also include a CAP location or a Community Assistance Program location at this site. So currently there is no fire station located where this would be built. We're proposing this to be built at 39th Avenue and Cactus Road in District 1. This simply was put forward because there's an existing gap in service delivery coverage in this part of the area of town. Right now, this portion of the area and the calls for service are primarily supported by automatic aid departments, primarily the Glendale Fire Department. But additionally, Station 30, Station 42, Station 33 support this area, all already busy companies that are having to provide a response into this gap. If the station were built today, we know Bay Data will support that engine company in that station would respond to over 2,800 calls for service. Again, a relatively and really busy fire engine by anybody's standards across the country. So for the new fire station number 70, they will include a CAP location. What would be the scope of the project? It would be to construct a new 18,000 square foot 4-bay fire station. 18,000 square foot does include the apparatus bays, and again allow us a new modern facility incorporating the health and environmental innovations that we seek to have in our new facilities. This project would be projected to cost $17,906,029. It would be a GEO bond funding at the same cost of $17,906,029, and there would be ongoing operational costs of $3,727,000 for this project. What would be the benefits to our community? Again, increased service delivery capacity of the community, improved response times, would allow for a new engine and rescue company to go into service, overall providing increased service delivery to the community, and provide a strategic location for a community assistance program to be dispatched from. And the third project that we wanted to discuss today was fire station number 74. This would be a new fire station in the system. We are proposing this to be located at 19th Avenue and Chandler Boulevard in District 6. This is in the Ahwatukee area, in the western portion of Ahwatukee. We're fortunate we do own property already from our previous bond program for this station to be built on. There is no existing station in this location at this time, and much like Station 70, we have an existing gap in service delivery coverage, and this is why this station was put forth originally in the proposal. We do have extended response times into this portion of Ahwatukee, certainly exceeding the standard, the NFPA standard I mentioned 2 weeks ago, and also our desire for standards for the Phoenix Fire Department. So for new fire station number 74, what would be the scope of this project? It would be to construct a new 12,000 square foot, 3-bay fire station, again, including the bays in that 12,000 square feet. It would provide a modern facility incorporating health and environmental innovations into that new facility. The cost of this project is projected to be $11,292,151. GO bond funding would be $10,292,151,000. There are impact fees available, so that is why the offset in the cost is far to the GO bond program. We would be utilizing impact fees as well. Ongoing operational costs would be $2,593,000 if this were to move forward. So what are the impacts to the community? Increased service delivery capacity to this portion of Ahwatukee and to the community overall, improve response times, and would allow for a new engine company to go into service into the western portion of Ahwatukee. So next we want to talk about the regional automatic aid system. We were asked to share how does the automatic aid system work, what's the benefits, how does it add value to the community. So we are very proud in the Phoenix metropolitan area of our automatic aid system. I will tell you we have one of the most comprehensive and largest true automatic aid systems that exist in the country. This is basically a sharing of resources where we cross jurisdictional boundaries every day, regardless of Phoenix, Glendale, Tempe, Scottsdale, or any other participating entities in the system. This was established in 1982 with 3 fire departments that included Phoenix, Glendale, and Tempe, and has grown into now what we have is 22 fire departments working seamlessly across our region to provide the best service to our community. You can see the map on the right, so all of these solid colors are jurisdictions that participate. So you can see we pretty much cover from north to south, to east to west in the automatic aid system. We're very proud of this, as we do believe this provides the highest level of service, not only to Phoenix, but to our region. So as I mentioned, this is a regional response regardless of geographical boundaries. So fire departments agree to allow their fire apparatus to be dispatched basically by the closest, most appropriate resource. So this way we can arrive as quickly as possible to that emergency regardless of what city it might occur in. This provides consistent service delivery across the region. So all the fire departments agree to train together, to staff their apparatus the same way, to follow the same operating orders. So regardless of what department shows up, you're going to get high-level care and customer service to your incident. This is the most effective utilization of regional resources. We know that this really has that synergistic impact, doing more together than we ever could do apart. We know that each department, each jurisdiction would need more fire stations, more fire apparatus, and more firefighters to meet the needs of their own communities if we did not work seamlessly together. Just to give you some context of what the impact is, so the Phoenix Fire Department provides over 19,000, almost 20,000 unit responses to the system each year. That's what we're projecting for calendar year 2022. And the City of Phoenix receives from the system over 23,000 unit responses each year. That's what we're projecting for 2022. So you can see it is a significant impact to service delivery in a positive way to the region. So next we wanted to talk a little bit about response area. The question was about could we demonstrate or know what the response times would go down if we were able to get our projects. We don't have the technology or capability here within our fire department to model that. So what I chose, or way I wanted to present this information to you to show you the impact is to show you really where we know we can get to currently from each fire station that's in question. So travel time is 4 minutes of our response time. As you remember, I mentioned 5 minutes to EMS, 5 minutes and 20 seconds to fire incidents is our response time standard we seek. So 4 minutes of that is our travel time, meaning when we leave a station, how quickly can we get to that incident? So if you look at the map on the slide, Station 7 is that red triangle in the middle. Everywhere in black is the road network within that primary response area. In black means we can arrive there within 4 minutes. So this is not a travel time. This is not a drive time issue as far as response times. This is a capacity or availability issue. Engine 7, as I mentioned, will respond to over 5,800 calls, almost 5,900 calls in this calendar year, the busiest apparatus in our system. And we know there are additional calls occurring within that primary response area. We're projecting over 7,500 incidents in that primary response area this calendar year. So they're simply not available to go on the calls that are happening. And that requires that secondary response I mentioned, again, driving up response times. So if we were able to get the new station and add that second engine company, we'd be sharing the load. Each apparatus approximately would be running over 3,700 calls, again, making them much more available for calls that happen or incidents that happen in their primary response area. This will improve response times because they'll be more available to respond to calls within their primary area. And much like 7, Station 13 really is the same situation. If you look at the map and the travel time, you can see Station 13 is the red triangle in the middle. You can see they can actually respond to within 4 minutes into other neighboring response areas, providing resiliency and redundancy to the system, which is a good thing for us. So you can see it's not a travel time issue. Engine 13, again, is busy apparatus, over 4,800 calls for service this year. 6,151 incidents are what we're projecting in that primary response area. Again, if we can get the second station, second engine, we're going to split that load to just over 3,000 calls, again, increasing availability, which will allow for improved response times. And then finally, Fire Station 15 is really the same situation. 15 is the red triangle right in the middle of that area. You can look at we have all black, meaning we can arrive everywhere we need to within that response area within 4 minutes. You can see we have very good redundancy and resiliency within the system, actually being able to respond into other primary response areas that surround Station 15, Station 26, for instance, Station 24, for instance. But Engine 15 is a busy apparatus as well. One of the top 10 busiest, at over 5,000 calls for service, and we're projecting they'll run in that response area over 6,400 calls. Again, if we can split that load by having a new station that allows for a second engine to be in that station, we can certainly increase availability and certainly improve response times. So hopefully that answers your question and demonstrates how we believe these projects would improve response times and service delivery to the community. And then the last question was raised to the fire department was what would be the impact to the fire department service model, service delivery or calls based on the Phoenix PD's 27th Avenue Corridor project. So what I chose to do is to demonstrate this in a way for you. So you can see on the map on the right, we outlined the 27th Avenue Corridor area, and I just defined it from basically Northern on the north, Indian School in the south, I-17 on the east, 33rd Avenue on the west, just for some context. That area now currently is served by Station 30, 26, and 18. Those are all busy fire stations. They all have multiple apparatus assigned to those stations, but they are providing support and care to that area today. In that area, that zone that I've identified, we will respond to over 8,000 calls for service this calendar year. And our top 5 incident response times are difficulty breathings, alarm soundings, car collisions, fall injuries. So you can see it really is just a cross-section of what we respond to every day across the city. So we really do not anticipate the PD project at 27th Avenue Corridor project to impact the fire department's service levels at all, really within that area at this time. We believe we're already busy. It's already a busy area. We're supporting it, but it really is just a small sampling of what we respond to every day across the city. So with that, that does conclude my portion of the presentation. I'm now happy to turn over to Assistant Chief Mike Kurtenbach.
Thank you, Chief Walker. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I too, as Chief Walker did, will be providing information based on questions that you asked of us at the last meeting. So first, just as Chief Walker discussed, I'm going to talk about what we commonly refer to as a 27th Avenue Corridor Plan. So this is a multifaceted approach that involves a number of city departments, much bigger than just the police department. The areas that have been identified, it's a very large area, 27th Avenue from Indian School on the south, all the way up to Bell Road on the north. It includes West Sunny Slope, Hatcher, as you can see, from 7th Avenue to 19th Avenue, and we'll be growing into the 19th Avenue corridor. One thing that we don't want to do, which could be a byproduct of enforcement in a targeted area, is merely displace criminal activity to another area. So that's why we want to grow this effort throughout the city to make sure that we're not doing that. This will involve a 2-year pilot program focused on 3 principal areas. As you can see, outreach, education, and partnerships. Prevention and intervention is key. If we can prevent crime, if we connect people to resources before their criminality occurs, then we reduce victimization. And lastly, enforcement. And that is placed 3rd for a reason. So you can see the goals that have been outlined by the city for the 27th Avenue Corridor project to improve the safety of area residents, businesses, patrons, students, all that frequent the area. To build upon the city's relationship with community groups and business partners, and to reduce violent and quality of life crimes within that corridor. And as we have grown as a police department, we're partnering with ASU to conduct pre- and post-intervention studies of the area to monitor our performance guidelines and our measurements. At the last meeting, we were asked about Priority 1 call response times. To refresh everyone's memory, We divide calls into three principal areas. Priority 1, which is a call in progress. A Priority 2 call is a call that recently occurred, and a Priority 3 is usually considered to be a report call. So going back to calendar year 2019 and 2020 and 21, which are full years, and this year, you can see how our median P1, Priority 1 response times have increased throughout the city. It's an average increase of 54 seconds throughout the city. The biggest increase is in Black Mountain Precinct, which is 1 minute and 12 seconds, down to just a little over 30 seconds, a little over 30 seconds in Central City Precinct. Now this graph is a little busy, so I'll take some time with it, and please ask any questions that you may have. But this breaks down the dispatch calls by precinct. So 200 being Black Mountain, South Mountain, Central City, Desert Horizon, Mountain View, Maryvale, Estrella Mountain, and Cactus Park. So the colors, as you see, 19, 20, and 21 are full years. 22, you see that's a beigeish color, is projected, with that first blue bar is calendar year to date, so January through July. So what you can see as you look at the stats is that, and this is important for everyone to recognize, it shows 657,000 projected calls for service that our officers are going to respond to. Roughly 3 times that many calls come into our communication center. So our 911 operators, our Crime Stop operators, they filter a number of those calls. Some of those are duplicate calls. Some are calls that get transitioned right to fire or to other agencies. But in addition to the calls that officers respond to that come through the communication center, there's almost 140,000 other calls that are initiated by officers. Those could be traffic stops, suspicious activity, any other activity that our officers see that didn't come through the communication center. That also affects their workload. So I wanted to highlight that as well. Focusing on the areas where the police department has requested facilities, specifically in the Black Mountain Northern Command area, you can see the number of combined calls there. Maryvale traditionally and has consistently for many years been the highest producer in terms of calls for service, over 150,000 calls for service in that precinct alone, and then Cactus Park is not far behind. Next, I want to talk about homicides by precinct. And I want to make a distinction to make sure that we're talking about the same numbers. So what you'll see here, again, just with the last slide, is calendar years 19, 20, and 21, and then through June of this year, and then the projected for the year. So what we report to the FBI are UCR numbers, Uniform Crime Report numbers. So at the first 6 months of the year, we were sitting at 113. So what we did, just simple police math, we just doubled that to get up to the 226. To provide context, the most homicides we have ever had in the city of Phoenix is 242 in 2007. UCR. UCR doesn't tell the full story about workload, however. So as of this morning, we're sitting at 174 homicides that our homicide investigators have actually gone out and conducted investigations on. We don't report self-defense within UCR. That's 24 of those homicides. So as of this morning, we're sitting at 150 homicides in the city of Phoenix calendar year to date. In the last 2 weeks alone, we've had 18 homicides in the city. We had 6 over the weekend. So you can imagine the workload that that places not only on our sworn investigators, but our crime scene specialists, our lab staff, all the staff that have to respond, and then the impacts to the officers who respond to those scenes and all of the techs that have to see the carnage that's out there. Additionally, I want to talk about death investigations that don't rise to the level of a homicide. Calendar year to date, we're sitting at 572 death investigations. People die for a variety of reasons this time of year, whether it be heat-related, drug overdose, whatever the case may be. Our investigators will never assume that that is a natural death or otherwise no foul play is involved, so there must be an investigation that is conducted into that as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Deputy Director Fazio.
Do you mind if I ask a few questions first? Is that right? All right. I have several of them, and I will try to be brief. Well, we're talking about the homicides. Do homicide detectives then, that means they investigate other types of crimes than just a homicide? Is that the UCR? Is that what muddies it, or can you explain that?
So, Mr. Chairman, Subcommittee Member Ender, yes, I understand that's a little complicated. So things aren't always as they appear. Sometimes a shooting can be very clearly, like the incident that occurred last night that we talked about already. There is a homicide that occurred there. But oftentimes the method and manner of death isn't evident. So we have night detectives who support our homicide investigators who tend to go out, as the name would imply, during the evening, covering those hours, non-traditional business hours, to conduct a preliminary investigation. If the death is deemed suspicious, homicide, if they're available, will respond. But a night like last night, as you can imagine, we were spread very thin. The incident where the officers were injured and other citizens were killed and wounded wasn't the only incident that happened in the city last night involving a homicide. So UCR is what we report, but beyond that, that's why I added the 24. Those are self-defense, ultimately determined to be self-defense. It's the same number of resources that go out to that investigation. You can't determine out at the scene or based on a radio call or a preliminary review whether or not something is self-defense. That may be determined down the road. And I also didn't include officer-involved shootings. That's a separate count beyond the UCR number and the 174 that I gave you.
So as a follow-up to that, we can see that Maryvale 800 has the highest incident of that. After touring it, I see that the facility doesn't necessarily accommodate detectives coming in there to do reports, drugs, drug busts. We have an open door to the booking room to facilitate the draft. But my point is, I guess what I'm going to ask you is, so if they were to have a renovated or a new precinct, how does that benefit the department, and then how does it benefit the community?
So, Mr. Chairman, Subcommittee Member Ender, what you saw out in Cactus Park, or in Maryvale and or in Cactus Park, are antiquated buildings that don't support modern policing. Our officers, our crime scene techs, our police assistants, they don't have the ability to conduct investigation in the field that could expedite the turnaround time on those investigations. All of our impounding of evidence needs to come downtown for analysis to the crime lab. If we had the ability to expand those facilities, to modernize those facilities, those would greatly enhance investigations out in the field. Those would greatly benefit our victims of crime. And as I mentioned earlier, if we can identify those responsible for that criminality before they further victimize, that benefits our community as a whole.
Last one, and this is for Assistant Chief Walker also. I was kind of surprised to hear that the calls for service regarding the 27th Avenue corridor plan were mostly people falling or short of breath, when the majority of that crime in there is what? Drugs, shootings, prostitution. So it didn't seem like it lined up. Do you have any comments on that?
Chairman Berline, Committee Member Ender, so those were the top 5 incident types that we respond to by numbers. Certainly those other incidents you referenced could be 6 and 7 in that. I don't have that information. But when we looked at what type of incidents are the majority we respond to, it really does represent kind of just cross-section of the city. Doesn't mean some of those, the difficulty breathing was our #1 call. Certainly those could be related to, you know, the issues, the incidents, or the types of scenarios you painted. I just don't have that information. Those are just the nature codes that we go on.
That makes sense. Okay, I promise this is last. Chief Kurtenbach, how do these numbers compare with, let's say, prior to 2019, maybe a 5-year period for homicides, and then the calls for service, the priority 1 calls for service?
So, Chairman Berline, Subcommittee Member Ender, our calls for service have been very consistent over time. You tend to see somewhere in the neighborhood of that 1.9 million that we're forecasting this year, up to 2.2 million that come into the communications center. It's anywhere between 650 to 700,000 dispatched calls for service. What you have seen decline rather appreciably is the on-view contact, or the self-initiated calls. And I believe that's principally because of a staffing issue, and the officers are responding to the citizen-generated calls, which is our priority, as opposed to initiating other calls, if that makes sense.
I'd like to give the board members who are online, Board Member Washington, Knight, and Williams an opportunity to ask any questions if you have any.
Mr. Chairman, one question I have, and looking at the submittals by both police and fire, and it was initially broken out into priority projects and future projects. Based upon the data and the submittals that was given to us as it relates to further explaining in greater detail the future projects, especially when you look at response time, et cetera. Was this predicated in terms of the dividing line between what was deemed to be the top priorities of the department today versus future projects? Was that based upon the ability to actually build out these projects? Was it based upon the impact on operating monies and whether or not that would be doable or achievable within a five-year time frame? And the reason I say that, when you look at a basic need, I think the data support having these facilities to be able to address the issue of response time, service needs, et cetera, that would better serve the total community. If indeed things can be done within a 5-year bond program timeframe, if that's something that they can try to explain to us, because I'm trying to determine as we go through this process what makes sense in terms of what we should be looking at for a total bond program. And to me, the future projects are just as important as I see as what was identified as the priority projects. So if there's further clarification on that line of demarcation would be helpful.
Thank you, Board Member Washington. Board Member Williams, I was just advised we're not able to hear her, so Zelda, if you have any questions or comments, turn it over to you.
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Board member.
Mr. Chair, I just have a quick question. Regarding the 27th Avenue corridor, one of the bullet points, city will be partnering with ASU to conduct pre- and post-intervention study in the area. That's specific to the 27th Avenue corridor?
It is.
Is there any, I think it's great. I think ASU is obviously more than capable. Wondering if anything has been done with GCU, and maybe that's a question for a different time, but obviously GCU that is part of the GCU footprint, and they make a pretty large investment into the crime safety initiative. I think that would be a potential partnership to look at. And then just an overall statement when it comes to both police and fire with these new fire stations. I think they're so incredibly well thought out. The data is there. I think it's important that we are data driven and that we are forecasting. And when you think about those two things, what's going to help us become the safest community possible it's simple. The type of technology that we should really be thinking about, infrastructure is technology. You know, what type of technology are we going to be implementing into our police precincts, our fire stations? In fact, I know the GO Bond Committee, it is infrastructure, but I think certain things could actually be looked at, and it's probably within that realm as well. Making it easier for our police department to ask homeowners directly for their doorbell technology information. You know, how quickly can we help solve a crime that way? I know we've talked about shot spotter technology in the past. Where are we with that? Is this an opportunity for us to really advance and move the ball there? So, thermal imaging cameras, which is something we have on fire trucks, I think they'd make our cops much safer when pursuing, pursuing a person who is, in a dark space. I just think those types of things, hopefully we are looking at that. We're looking at this opportunity as a chance to get better and really move the ball. Some technologies, as we know, aren't even created yet. But if we have the foresight of knowing as we outfit these stations, I don't think it's going to be in the next few years that we're going to see all electronic fire trucks, as an example. But one day we will, and these stations are built to last a very long time. So, will we be prepared? We'll be able to look back on this bond election and say, we really planned those things out accordingly. So I just want to be sure that we are really emphasizing technology when we are thinking of adding to our police and fire departments.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to that?
Yes, sir.
Secretary Member Valenzuela, I appreciate you bringing that up. You may remember that back in 2013, I was responsible for bringing body-worn cameras out to the Maryvale Precinct. And at that time, that was considered new technology, and there was some reticence by some of our officers to wear the technology. You can't find an officer that won't go out on the street without it now. And the 27th Avenue Corridor Project is very technology-laden. We talk about not having the staffing that we had once before. Well, that's not an excuse to not do quality police work. But technology helps us do that. Technology that identifies that criminal activity that I alluded to before, that can get to those people that are responsible for that activity, the shot spotter technology or iterations thereof that we deploy, cameras, whether they be fixed or mobile. And then what we've been able to do, because of the council support, is develop a real-time operations center out at the Cactus Park Precinct. We look to replicate that into other precincts, and perhaps in time a real-time crime center located in the new police headquarters right across the street from where we're sitting today. The key words being real-time, so that we can identify those responsible for that criminal activity as quickly as possible and bring them to justice so there isn't further harm to our community. So that is definitely part of this effort.
That's great. And we are on the same page when it comes. I remember the body-worn camera project, and no one in the community wanted them either. And now everyone, as you said, the cops want them, community members want them, everyone wants them. It makes our city a safer city. So we are on the same page. Some of these things that we've talked about in the past have been aspirational. I mean, we're here, and by the time these funds are collected and it's time to go out to RFPs, think about what we'll be at that point. So I'm glad to hear you say that, Chief. I'm not surprised, but I do want that. I just want to put that out there and on the record. We really should be, not just thinking that way. We have an opportunity to actually act accordingly in that way, and making it easier think about our personal vehicles. On the way up here, have all these voice commands in my truck to multitask. Do our cops have that in their police cars? They probably have that in their personal vehicles, right? So it's just thinking about all of those things that will make their job easier, because as you just pointed out, in other words, we are understaffed. And hopefully we will get on the right track there. I'm certainly hopeful, and I believe we will. But technology is how we're going to make this a safer place all the way around. Thank you.
Chief Walker, would you like to comment?
Yes,
And
thank you.
I know the fire department is looking at the next generation of fire stations.
Thank you, Chairman Berline and Committee Member Valenzuela. We appreciate that. I appreciate you recognizing that the data-driven process that we're utilizing. This is something we're very proud of. Over the last probably 3 to 5 years, we really worked to move the fire department to a really data-driven, objective type thinking organization, and allows us to have our 20-year forecast, our facility needs, and that's how we were able to put this information together. So I appreciate that. But you are correct. Technology is one of the areas I oversee in the fire department, and it's one of the areas that we look at how we can apply technology to everything we can do, whether it's building a fire station, whether it's buying apparatus, whether it's tracking firefighters in a building, whether it's how we can reduce the number of calls we're going on and really providing a better response or better resource to that customer calling. We're working to a telehealth program where we're actually going to have a 911 diversion program where people actually just need to talk to a doctor. We're working with technology to see how we can do that on the front end. So we're looking at technology in all things we do. In our fire stations, one of the things I mentioned about bringing those innovative technologies into the new facilities, it's not just looking at firefighter health with the cancer exposures and how we create hot, cold, warm zones in our fire stations, but it's also in the fire station how we build them. How can we build a fire station? My direction has been, as we're actually building a fire station today in the southwest portion of our valley, is that we're building a fire station that's going to be there 50, 60, 70 years. We know that. So what does the needs of that community going to be out that far? We are planning for electric vehicle charging in that station, certainly on the light duty fleet, so whether it be workers that arrive to the fire department or using a city vehicle that park there. We are exploring also in our fire stations where it makes sense in electric fire trucks and how we'll charge those as well. So we're exploring all those options. We really appreciate that support, but it is incorporated in, I would say, everything that we think about every day in the fire department.
That's great. I appreciate it. I know the people of Phoenix, our neighbors, all appreciate all of your comments to both of our chiefs, our assistant chiefs here today. So it's good news. Appreciate it.
Right. Chiefs Kurtenbach and Walker, I want to thank you for your presentations. Your experience and your wealth of knowledge is invaluable to not only your departments but the city. And I want to thank you and all your men and women for keeping us safe. I want to recognize our Fire Chief Duran, who is here in attendance today, and our Police Chief Williams and their outstanding leadership, and thank you all and all of your staff for protecting all of us. We're going to move to public comment now. We have several speakers registered today, including 3 virtual participants wishing to speak. I'll give each speaker 2 minutes. We'll start with virtual participants. When your name is called, your audio device will be unmuted, and you may begin your remarks. At the conclusion of the virtual speakers, we will invite in-person attendees to the podium to address the committee. I will now ask the city attorney to explain the rule of public comment in GO bond committee meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the public may speak to comment on the general obligation bond program. The City Code requires speakers to present their comments in a respectful and courteous manner. Profane language, threats, or personal attacks on members of the public, council members, committee members, or staff are not allowed. A person who violates these rules will lose the opportunity to continue to speak. The committee and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters related to pending claims or litigation.
I'll now ask staff to call the speakers.
Good morning. Our first virtual speaker will be Frank Steinmetz and be followed by Chris Murphy. Frank is not with us on the line, so Chris Murphy, you are up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You may proceed.
Thank you. My name is Chris Murphy, and I'm a resident of District 1. I am also a sworn member of the Phoenix Fire Department with nearly 30 years of service, and I want to say thank you for the hard work that you guys have put in on this bond, especially to Member Berline and Scott Walker, who I served next to for, again, nearly 30 years. Every citizen of Phoenix needs to be aware of the escalating crisis in the fire department and how it directly affects them and those they care about. Since 2010, the population of Phoenix has grown 21%. During that time, calls for EMS and fire service have increased by 64%. But unfortunately, the resources to deal with these emergencies, such as firefighters, paramedics, fire trucks, and stations, has only grown by 2%. Since the last bond, we've only added 1 fire station. We have worked tirelessly to ensure to get a fire truck to your house within 5 minutes. Unfortunately, because of rising demand and resources spread to the breaking point, when you and your family need us the most, it is taking us closer to 9 minutes, which is not where we want to be. Let that sink in. If your house catches on fire, if your loved one has a stroke, or if a child drowns, you want us there as quickly as possible. If nothing is done, people will die despite our best efforts because we can't get there fast enough to help. Additionally, if you need a ride to the hospital, we only have one ambulance for every 63,000 people. However, we can make a change that can reverse this dangerous trend. We need full restoration of the fire department's request to the GO bond, which includes 4 new stations, 4 replacement stations, 13 additional fire trucks, and 7 additional ambulances. We need to move those back above the cut line, so to speak. Without these necessary resources, our ability to help you in your time of need will be greatly diminished. And I worked at one of the stations that Scott talked about, Station 7. The most important thing is they run so many calls that if you live in that first 2 area and you need assistance, you're most likely not going to get them. You're going to get that second due truck, and that's where time is critical. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, virtual speaker, is Daryl Kriplian, followed by A.J. Marston in the upper chambers. Daryl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. You may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Daryl Kriplian. I serve as the president of the Phoenix Law Enforcement Association, and I represent approximately 2,200 police officers and detectives for the city of Phoenix. It's no secret that our police department is dangerously understaffed. The city has made attempts and strides towards trying to fix that with a new pay structure. But what I'll say, like our fire brothers, our buildings that were created and built in the 70s and 80s were not designed to hold the staffing that we are needing at this time. You see that the 900 and 800 precincts specifically run the most number of calls. We have a workload that is insurmountable at this point. And to bring attention to the 7-minute and 20-second response time, the average response time for priority 1 calls, remember that's the average. That doesn't mean that's the longest, right? We've got some calls that'll take 10 to 12 minutes to get to, and others that take 30 seconds to 45 seconds. That should be scary to every one of our residents. The city is required as a core service to provide public safety for our residents. As it is now, we are unable to provide that good quality customer service because we are understaffed. But as we continue to grow, and I'm optimistic that this pay structure reorganization will aid in that, we don't have any place to put them. So I would encourage the recommendations put forth by Chief Kurtenbach and the police department be taken seriously, and just as important as the fire department. The community should expect better from their police department, and we as servants of the community want to provide a high quality of customer service, and this would help us do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kriplian, and the men and women of plea.
Our next speaker is A.J. Marston in the upper council chambers.
Hi, I am A.J. Marsden, and I live in a high crime area of the Desert Horizon Precinct. It seems that every Phoenix police request is scrutinized like no other city department. Our officers do dangerous work on the streets, 24/7, work that many people are not willing or able to do. And as we heard, they do important work in the precinct. They brief, train, process information and items. They talk to criminals, victims, and witnesses. You know what? They even have to eat meals there. They work out and they have to shower there too. Only a few people don't like the work that police need to do. Yet, an overwhelming majority of citizens have respect and gratitude for our police. While we may not have all of the funding information itemized, that does not take away the importance of the items being asked for and that Chief Kurtenbach delineated. Have you ever been to the Maryvale Precinct? Have you seen the rigging that happens when the AC goes out? Have you seen the trouble their leaking roofs cause? I have. Well, just picture a leak in your own roof. Our officers should not have to worry about hot days or the rain. And have you been to the Cactus Park Precinct? I have. The sheer number of officers working there and the increased crime that needs to be processed has officers all over the precinct hoping to find a spot to impound items and write reports in between taking bites of food. Now, many of you have redone a room in your house, upgraded your appliances, probably even bought a new couch. I know I've done a lot of those. Maybe you've redone your AC and your plumbing, a full remodel. Maybe you've even moved to a new house when your old house got too small. Maybe your company has done something to make your space more efficient and comfortable, and in turn, all of these things made you more comfortable and efficient. I just want to finish by saying that the Victim Center was recently redone, so I know that we understand that environment has effects on stress. Please extend this understanding and consideration to our officers who make sure the people who caused the victims to be in harm are apprehended. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, that was our last speaker.
Okay, this concludes our public comment period. I want to thank all who participated, and I will open up the meeting to subcommittee members for any other comments or discussion. Buddy?
Want to have Mr. Fazio discuss the ranking methodology possibilities?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. As the chair remarked earlier, the executive committee has directed subcommittees to identify the highest priority items for this bond program that cannot reasonably be deferred. It's important for the public to be aware that this subcommittee's recommendation does not mark the end of this process or the final opportunity for the public to weigh in. The executive committee will continue to receive public input, as will council later this year. That being said, this subcommittee has 2 meetings after today to develop and finalize your recommendations. Staff recognize that this is a challenging task. In order to come to a recommendation, the subcommittee will need to determine the list of projects that will need to be evaluated first, then determine the rank order of those projects. In some cases, the committee may want to propose to increase or decrease funds for an individual project compared to the recommendation of staff. And finally, the committee will need to determine which projects are not going to be moved forward to the executive committee. With there being only 4 meetings to complete this work, the subcommittee will need to finalize the list of projects that are to be evaluated by the next meeting at the latest. Once the population of projects is settled, the subcommittee will then need to work through relative priorities and costs. There's not a prescribed method for how this subcommittee will come to its recommendation, but staff have set up an optional process to help facilitate this decision-making. This would essentially involve individual committee members completing a survey between the 3rd and the 4th subcommittee meetings, unless the subcommittee believes it's in a place now to move on to that step between the 2nd and the 3rd meetings. Members' responses would be aggregated and presented to the subcommittee at the 4th meeting as the starting point for the committee's deliberation. Staff would go over this process in detail at the next subcommittee meeting, at the subcommittee's request, unless, of course, the subcommittee believes that it's at the point now of embarking on that process. Subject to your questions, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Fazio. Any questions?
Good morning. One question about the ranking option. Ranking is the right way to go. Do we have a comprehension of what factors we want to look at and how we will go about that ranking?
Mr. Chair, committee members, there is no prescribed method for how the subcommittee would rank its projects. Staff could offer staff's recommendations on a ranking, but there's no particular prescribed method for the subcommittee. It is subjective.
Any other committee members have any comments or thoughts? All right. As members of this committee, we have some homework. We have a couple of options you mentioned for for ranking priorities, open forum, or a type of survey. Do you want us to take action on that, or open up to the committee members, let them decide what is the best way to proceed?
Mr. Chair, an option would be to poll the committee in this meeting to determine if the committee believes that it's at a point now where the population of projects is known. Once we have that decision on what population the subcommittee wants to be evaluating, at that point, staff could circulate a preliminary survey to the subcommittee so that coming into your third meeting, you would know where individual members collectively stand in their rankings and afford 2 meetings for deliberations, as opposed to having all of the deliberations consolidated into the fourth meeting. So that would be an option for the committee.
Thank you. With that, I will open up to the committee members. Are you comfortable with the list of programs or projects that we have in front of us, and are you all prepared to look at them and prioritize them?
I'm comfortable with them. I think so.
I think we've got a good list, and let's move ahead and start looking at ranking.
I'm comfortable also, especially with the clarification. Obviously, I really believe both departments understand that, we're going to be leading with technology and making sure things are done. Both departments are already doing that, so it's good to emphasize that and put that on the record as well.
Okay. Member Washington?
I'm very comfortable with it as well, Mr. Chairman. I would just say that I wouldn't want to make any distinction between so-called future projects and the so-called priority projects. To me, it's one universe, and that's what we should be looking at.
Thank you. Board Member Knight?
I'm comfortable with the current list, and as Mr. Washington stated, I wouldn't want to see future, present, but just all of them included in to rank.
Thank you, Ms. Knight. Board Member Williams?
I'm comfortable with the list we have. I'm just not sure what our next step is. Do we submit this prior to the meeting to staff, or is this to be brought back to the next meeting?
Mr. Fazio?
Mr. Chair, I'll ask staff if we can pull up the presentation again, and we can go through the details of what that facilitated process would look like, if that's how the committee would like to proceed. So, Mr. Chair, what we've come up with is a SurveyMonkey tool. A link would be sent to each subcommittee member after this meeting, most likely tomorrow, using that tentatively identified list of projects, which I'm hearing from the committee would be the prioritized projects as well as the future projects, is the universe of projects that we would be sending to the subcommittee to rank. Members would individually complete this survey. Our staff assistant who's assigned to the subcommittee would be available for any technical assistance if that's needed. Certainly if a committee member wished to come into City Hall and have some hands-on assistance with completing the survey, that's something we could certainly accommodate. I'll go through an example of what this survey would look like. The data set that I used for these screenshots is from the Parks and Recreation Subcommittee, so please bear that in mind. Survey would first ask for your name and email address. That's simply so that we can index a response to a committee member. So if you need technical assistance, we know who to contact. Our intent, though, is not to share the results of the survey at the individual level. When we come back to the subcommittee, we would be sharing aggregate information on average ranks, et cetera. Next, we'd be asking for the rank order. So you would see a pre-populated list of projects in alphabetical order, and individual committee members would be reordering that list based on their own recommendations on relative priority. It's a fairly intuitive tool. Drag the project to where you want it to be on the list, and it automatically rank orders the projects for you. The next question would be asking committee members, are any projects where the committee believes an increased funding level is warranted? So that may not be very common with this subcommittee. It's more typical perhaps for a subcommittee that's looking at lump sum projects, aggregate pots of money, as opposed to discrete individual projects. Similarly, any projects where the subcommittee believes a reduced funding level is appropriate as compared to what staff has published in the capital needs study. And finally, any projects that the subcommittee members believe should not move forward to the executive committee. So between this meeting and the next meeting, staff would aggregate committee members' responses, summarize the results. So for example, the average rank among all the subcommittee members, as well as counts for projects that subcommittee members have flagged for increased funding, decreased funding, or no funding. So for example, if 3 members flagged a project as not meriting funding, we would be communicating that information to the subcommittee as a trigger for the subcommittee's discussion and to flush out where subcommittee members had that indication. This would simply be a start for the subcommittee's deliberations. The thought process behind this is simply that it's going to be easier for the subcommittee to start from aggregated individual responses rather than an open forum for individually determining projects' priorities. So I think based on what I heard earlier, that the direction staff would need would really be to finalize what the list of projects is that the subcommittee would like to see in that survey ranking tool, whether it's the prioritized projects plus the future capital needs or something in between.
I'd like to comment on the listing and recognizing that the work to get us to where we are today with these projects actually began several years ago when Thelda Williams was the interim mayor. And in consideration for all the work that's been put into these projects, all the work that staff has done, and the leadership of the police department and fire department, I would request that the list show the request of priority by the police departments and fire departments, so the committee members can have an idea of what their priority list looks like, or we mix it up too much.
So, Mr. Chair, we could have the initial list populated based on the individual department's recommended priority order. That could look like all of the fire projects being grouped together, followed by all of the police projects being grouped together, or we could flip a coin and stagger it, which one is number 1 and which one is number 2, whatever the committee would like.
I would prefer them separate police and fire and priority from section heads. And I'll open up to my board members committee members for comment.
Something that helped me is getting an idea of the risks and the benefits with each one. For example, if we're going to reduce the response time, what is it by each project, or all the different attributes that come along with it? Is that possible to include?
Mr. Chair, committee members, I don't know that that's something we could communicate through the survey tool. It's something certainly we could have dialogue with the committee about.
Mr. Chair, Subcommittee Member Jackson, we could provide you separate, but alongside the survey tool, a summary of what you've seen in the presentations as it relates to the community benefit and the statistics related to each prioritized or future need item, if that would be helpful. We have most of that already put together from previous presentations. There would be a few that we would have to put together for some of the future needs that we haven't yet presented to the committee.
I think for me, yeah, simple Excel or something along those lines would do it.
I just had a quick question. Will you be giving us some kind of template that we will follow for the summary that we present at the end of this?
Mr. Chair, committee members, the deliverable from the subcommittee would be the rank ordered list of projects. So that's not something the subcommittee would have to creatively invent. That's something staff would facilitate.
I support your thought, Mr. Chair. Separate list, prioritized.
Have enough, or?
Mr. Chair, yes, I think we do. What I think our next step would be is compiling the information that you'd like to accompany the survey. We have a bit of a breather in that the next subcommittee meeting, I think because of the Labor Day holiday, isn't until a few weeks out. So we'll come up with what types of deadlines would be needed in terms of getting subcommittee members' responses. We could send the survey in advance of providing that additional information to you, or we could hold up the survey until we have that information compiled, whatever your preference is.
Okay. With that, do any subcommittee members have any other requests for the next agenda? Anybody? Okay. All right. As we wrap this meeting up, I'll give staff one more opportunity. Is there any other questions you had for the subcommittee members? Or
Mr. Chair, I do have just one thing that I think was left unanswered as it relates to subcommittee member Washington's comments and questions earlier. He was asking about, the logistical or practical ability to actually implement a larger number of projects. Should we, should the recommendation be to the executive committee that more projects be included than what have been prioritized to date? There are some logistical challenges to that, so I just wanted to make the subcommittee aware of those. For example, the fire department has prioritized 4 fire stations, but included 8 fire stations in the full list of prioritized and future need projects. Building 8 fire stations within 5 years is a significant challenge, and would pose some logistical and practical challenges to being able to do all of that at the same time. I just want to, and that's the same for the police department projects as well. Just undertaking that many projects at the same time within a 5-year period is a significant challenge. And I do want to remind the subcommittee that the intent is to have a GEO bond program in 2023, but also 5 to 7 years following that as part of the full strategic plan for the bond programs. So I just want the subcommittee to be appropriately informed as you're making these decisions, because I wouldn't want to have a situation where the expectation is to implement a larger number of facilities than is practically possible.
Thank you, Ms. Bays. Any comments or questions? Okay. Well, I want to remind our viewing audience and subcommittee members about the public hearing that is scheduled for the GEO Bond Executive Committee on Wednesday, September 14th at 6 p.m. This will be a hybrid meeting, so residents will be able to participate virtually or in person. More information is available at Phoenix.gov/bond. Our next meeting is scheduled for September 19th. Subcommittee members, please notify staff in advance if you have a conflict with this meeting. I want to recognize again Mayor Gallego, our council members, our city manager, Jeff Barton, and the entire staff for just this opportunity and the scope of what's in front of us. And we've heard testimony, we've seen the presentations, how important this work we're doing is, and for the future of the city, the police department, the fire department. And again, thank you for the opportunity. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Valenzuela. Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you.
Good morning. On behalf of Phoenix Fire Chief Mike Duran and executive staff and Local 493 Union President Steve Berline, we thank you for coming out for our April Pools mock drowning event.
Councilwoman Ann O'Brien used this April Pools event to address drowning fatalities this year.
And only 3 months into 2022, and Phoenix has already experienced 14 drownings, including 4 fatalities, one of them a 2-year-old. Phoenix Drowning Zero campaign goal, 0 drownings, is a lofty one, but it is achievable when adults are hyper-vigilant with kids around water.
Phoenix Aquatic Supervisor Becky Hewlett has a clear message about drowning.
Drowning is something that is 100% preventable. It's not a disease, it is 100% preventable.
Phoenix Fire Chief Mike Duran shared some advice on avoiding little-known ways that toddlers can drown.
Our children depend on adults to protect them and keep them safe, and it requires a constant adult supervision. When I say constant supervision, I also mean anticipating potential water hazards. While it seems incomprehensible that a child could drown in a bucket, a toilet, tragically we witness this all too often. Emptying your cleaning buckets inside them as soon as you're finished, closing your toilet lid are important things and reminders to all of you. Toddlers have large heads and are top heavy, and they can topple over in those. And never, ever, ever leave your child alone in a bathtub. And when it comes to pools, there are a number of steps you can take to optimize protecting little ones. Never leave your children alone, unattended in a pool. Always have a designated child watcher.
Kathleen Mascarenas from SRP defined water watchers for the audience.
As an assigned responsible water watcher, that person maintains direct visual eye contact with anyone in the water at all times.
Steve Berline, president of Local 493, shared his personal experience with calls about drowning.
I came into the fire service in 1995, and just a couple months into my career, I was responded to a double drowning, and I remember the details as if it were yesterday, all those years ago. You never forget these calls. These firefighters and paramedics who are here today, these police officers, we never forget these calls. They, by far, are the most difficult calls to go on. A couple moments prior to us arriving,